you so much for coming. It's wonderful to see a full room. This is the Science Communication Crash Course. We'll be with you for the next hour and 15 minutes, but we'll also stick around afterwards. So if you want to have one-on-one discussions with us or have a bit more in-depth feedback and ideas, please do stick around afterwards. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I'm Sabine Hauert. I'm a professor of swarm engineering at the University of Bristol, and I've been doing science communication for a good part of 15 years. I'm also the executive trustee of robohub.org and AIhub.org. Evan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm Evan Ackerman. I'm a senior editor at IEEE Spectrum. I've been writing about robots for a long time, but I'll get more background too when I.
Great, and Laura?
Yeah, and I'm Laura Bridgeman. I'm the audience development manager at IEEE Spectrum Magazine.
Great. So just to hear a little bit more about the two organizations. So RoboHub and AIHub are nonprofits based in the UK dedicated to connecting the robotics and AI communities to the public. We've produced nearly 9,000 articles over the decade, 1,300 research contributions. So we really work with researchers to help them spread their work. And we love to train people in science communication so that we can scale up our effort even more, and we're supported by a lot of the robotics and AI organizations around the world. And then, do you want to say something about Spectrum? Probably you need to use a mic.
Okay, I think I got it. But I guess I should. Okay. About IEEE Spectrum. Well, IEEE is the Institute for Electrical and Electronics Engineers, I think. Usually by this time at a conference, I forget that E stands for, second E. So yeah, we've been around for a very long time. Obviously, we are a huge professional society. Hopefully I don't have to tell everybody here what IEEE is, but anyway, Spectrum's job is to communicate what IEEE members are working on to the IEEE audience and beyond. So a lot of what we do is coming to conferences like this and talking to engineers and finding ways of making your research and their research accessible to both other engineers and also people beyond engineering. And that's kind of our biggest challenge, and what we hope you can help us with is to effectively translate your research so that a lot more people know all the cool stuff that you do.
So you're in very good hands, and please use us because we love to help people communicate about their work. So why does science communication matter? This is a very famous paper by Rodney Brooks from 1986 on the subsumption architecture. And this is probably one of the most cited papers in the robotics field. Do you have a sense for how many citations this paper has? Feel free to shout out numbers.
1 million.
1 million. Oh. Can you imagine having 1 million citations? 13,407. So a big number. I think if any of us had that many citations, we'd be quite proud. This is a video from around 9 years ago.
I believe that human-like robots like those will walk among us. They will help us. They will play with us. They will teach us. They will help us put the groceries away. I think that the artificial intelligence will evolve to the point where they will truly be our friends. Do you want to destroy humans? Please say no.
Okay, I will destroy humans.
No, I take it back.
How many views do you think this video has?
Yes, again.
You were closer with the first guess. 20 million. So which one of these do you think has more impact on the public's perception of robotics and what it can do? So us as researchers, we often live in a bubble, right? We have our own research, and then we'll talk to peers through conferences like ICRA. We'll talk to industry through meetings or in the exhibit hall. We'll talk to funding agencies through grants. And actually, we produce an immense quantity of great stuff in written form and video form, but it tends to stay in this bubble. And sometimes if there's something really important that we want to tell the outside world, this little bubble, us, will communicate to a press office and send out a piece of news to the rest of the world. So that's a really good way of doing things. But sometimes what happens is the rest of the world keeps talking about your work and you remain in that little bubble in the corner. And we now have much better ways of connecting with the general public. And the public includes policymakers, those that are thinking about regulation around our technology, users who might adopt our technology in the future, investors who might be putting money in our startups, future generations who we really want to inspire to enter the field of robotics, taxpayers who pay for some of our research, and the funding agencies. So these are all people that matter and that we want to interface with. And we're the right people to be communicating about this technology because we're experts, so we know how it works. We can demystify the technology. And we also need to hear back from all of those publics because we are building the future. And without this bidirectional interaction, we might be designing the right technology. It's also not a selfless activity. There's a lot in it for you. So if you are a science communicator, you improve your ability to communicate. You have a better breadth of scientific ideas because you hear from a lot of different places. Hopefully you design better technology because you're really listening to what people are looking for. You can learn about the latest conferences, grants, opportunities, papers, and it allows you to create a network of peers that you interact with and connect with. I know I've had great opportunities. I've met future students. I've been invited to places on the basis of doing science communication. So there's a reason we don't all do it. One is very often people don't know how to do science communication, and that's the purpose of this workshop. They might not have time and feel like it's a huge time sink. And sometimes they don't have an audience. So even if they put out a little message on their blog, who is going to see them? And so part of what we do is try to address each one of these 3 points. First of all, there's many different ways you can do science communication. You could engage with media, you could do podcasts, you could do videos, you could do social media, you could do an art exhibit, you could do a press release and work with your media teams. And if you're interested in some in-depth and ideas about how you can do SciComm, please go check out some of these videos we've produced with researchers in the field who tell you how they do science communication. Today, because this is a crash course, we thought we'd start with social media as a starting point. And social media is a good way to connect directly with all those different audiences I mentioned before. And there's really 2 ways to do social media. One is to be a passive actor, and one is to be an active actor within these social media networks. If you're passive, this can already be really useful. So being a passive member means you have a social media account, but mostly you use it to follow, to build a network, to see what's happening in your community, maybe to amplify cool messages that you think are useful. And the way to do that could be to choose your favorite social media. For example, a lot of people are looking at Blue Sky right now. They have these starter packs. So this is a robotics starter pack. And you can select that, click follow all, and then you'll have lots of roboticists to follow from that starter pack. And then you can go and see who those roboticists follow, and you can basically build a network of people who you think are pretty interesting, maybe funding agencies, conferences like ICRA, and have in one place a really efficient way to get your news and to see what's happening in your community. And that doesn't require you to put yourself out there. You're sort of a background listener, seeing what's happening, amplifying cool messages when you see them. But we also hope that some of you will want to be active science communicators. And so that means writing content, producing content that you put out there. And there really it's about trying to find ways to design your message, and we'll come to that in a second. And it's quite useful when in your research to think about how you can compress what you're doing into a social media post. It allows you to be really concise and get to the point quite quickly. It allows you to engage in discussions and allows you to build connections with all those people you might want to actively network. It's not all good, so I'm going to put a little caveat that sometimes these direct interactions can be a time sink, especially if they start controversies or arguments. And also these short forms in social media are not the best to have proper debates. So I personally steer clear, and maybe that's something you might want to do if you're just entering in the scene so that you can really gain the most of it before you sort of dive into those more challenging topics. So how do we go about finding our story? Whatever the platform you're using, this is going to be important. And what you really need to figure out is what aspect of your research do you want to talk about? What format do you want to use to talk about it? And who is going to be your audience so that you can calibrate it at the right level? To make a good story, typically what you'll want to do is make sure that you bring in the application so people understand what your research is for, even if it's a faraway application. It's nice if you can touch on lived experiences to give a sense for, to give a bit of story behind it, to get a bit of passion. And it's nice if there's a nice journey in your article so that we can walk people through the content that you've produced. And so for that, you'll want a really clear structure. And I'm going to give you a possible structure now. So if you're interested in writing a story on social media or a blog post, these are some of the topics that we like to cover. What problem are you trying to solve? Why is it important? How does this relate to people's lives? So that's sort of the story angle. What is the current state of the art in the field? What's the contribution of your research? What are the implications of your findings? What challenges did you face? What are the limitations of your contributions? And what are you planning to do next? I've put little stars on only 2 of these things, because if you cover just 2 of them, you already have a story, and that's mainly what problem are you trying to solve, and what is the contribution of your research. So if this sounds really daunting, because there's lots of different points you need to address, start with 2 of these. That already gives you a nice social media post, and I'll show you an example of that. It even gives you a good blog post, and then if you want to expand on any side of this, that gives you more. You could create a thread, or you could produce more content around that. So for an example, this is a paper that we published this week at ICRA that was around robot swarm to help with social interactions. So this is the title, Express Yourself, Enabling Large-Scale Public Events Involving Multi-Human Swarm Interaction for Social Applications with Mosaics. It's not the most technical title, but it's still not clear if you were to just read this, what this paper is about. And so if we go back to this idea of answering these questions, I can break this down and start thinking about how to communicate it a bit better. So for example, what problem are you trying to solve? I can probably summarize this in 1 sentence. Brainstorming can drive social progress, but how do we ensure everyone is heard and included would be a good summary of the challenge that we're trying to tackle. And then I can go to the second one and say, well, we introduced Mosaics, a robot swarm designed to help humans brainstorm. Over 3 days, 60 robots helped over 290 participants contribute ideas about how to improve health and well-being in their city. So just answering these 2 questions gives me a social media post that's quite informative, and then you can link out to your paper. You can then use this as a basis to expand into a blog post. So I could take every part of this, expand it a little bit, and then you have a longer form of what you were trying to achieve. And Evan's going to mention how AI is useful here. It is quite useful when it's your own content to play around with ChatGPT or other tools to see how it sounds and to help you refine your messages. So for example, if I expand brainstorming can drive social progress, now I can talk about what that means, and I can give a little bit more context to that. Same for, what does it mean to be heard and included, and give examples of that so that the reader is really understanding where I'm going. And I can do that for the second part. And so if you combine these 2 things, you'll see at the end that produces pretty much a blog post, not in the depth that Evan would produce, but something that you as a researcher can put out and that already drives visibility of your content. Now, with everything that you do, and especially in robotics, we have the ability to put media, whether that's videos or images. And so it makes sense to build a portfolio of media that's really relevant for your research. And there's a number of places you can go for this. One is that you can use photos or graphs or images from your own research papers. We should reuse as much as possible all the stuff we write and make all the time. So anything you can reuse, but maybe just make it a bit simpler, please do. You can create your own images that are best suited for the article. You can buy stock photography, and actually we do that a lot, just for the sake of getting images that someone else has worked on that fit our stories very well. There's a lot of images that are freely available online, and I'll give you some links. And you can use AI-generated images if you're comfortable with that, if you follow a set of guidelines. And I just want to point to this really nice resource, Better Images of AI. They're a nonprofit that aims to make images that are not the typical ones that you see, that give a bit more richness, show a bit more diversity in the AIs and the robots represented, as well as the users represented. And they're really good at explaining complex topics. So you can see at this conference, there's lots of machine learning. Sometimes it's challenging to convey machine learning in a figure. They have lots of good ideas for that. So I would point in their direction. For stock photography, there's a number of websites that provide free images, and you always want to check the licensing, so to see if you're allowed to reuse that content. But do have a look at what exists. And then if you have an image from your research, then you can put it in your own blog post. Sorry, some people were taking pictures of that. We'll make these available. So I've taken the text that I produced before, put an image from one of the videos that we included in our ICRA submission, and this is a blog post. It didn't take very long. It's a little bit easier to process than what we had in the original paper form. And then this is something you can put on your social media channels, your blogs, and then you can send it to websites like ours or IEEE RAS, or you can send it to Evan so he knows what you've been working on. And so then that visibility goes through other people. So if you disseminate that, other people can help you share that a bit more. Now, one thing our charity is quite worried about is hype, especially in fields like robotics and AI. What I did is I pulled the top news items from Google last night, and I think it's quite informative to see what people are talking about in mainstream media. There's a lot of discussion about humanoids. I mean, there's a lot of excitement too, which is great. But if you look in 3 of these 6 titles, it talks about, you know, they're not far away, dark factories where there's no humans. It talks about replacing human workers. So this is a lot of the narrative that we're seeing just without any cherry picking in the top news items that are coming out. And so I think it's our responsibility to also put out lots of information so that there's a broader narrative around what's happening in robotics. And it's important to not engage too much into the hype, although Evan will highlight some places where you might want to hype a bit, because it sets inflated expectations about the technology. It drives unnecessary fear in the general public about being replaced. It distracts from the meaningful discussions that we actually need to be having so that the technology develops in the right way. And so it's our responsibility as communicators to do a good job. And some tips that you might want to adopt: try not to exaggerate your work. Try to be specific about your contributions. What you're doing is already so exciting. And so it's really about conveying what you're doing now that's important, not what this could be in 20 years' time, although you might want to tease at that. Make any limitations clear. Try to avoid anthropomorphizing your technology so that it doesn't sound too human-like or magical if that's not the intention. And then it's important to prioritize scientific and accurate headlines so that we don't end up with those news items sometimes which are a bit more challenging. And then I've taught you how to get good images, so please try to not get bad images so that we feed into this hype. So that was my part. It's a very quick crash course, but really what I want to convey is, please, if you are comfortable, start on this journey of communication. It does get easier. If you're not comfortable, still use the tools and be a passive actor in this network. And please do have fun. We've done escape rooms. There's lots of different ways you can communicate, and they're often very fun. Okay, now to Evan.
Hello. So I'm going to talk about robots for people who know nothing about robots. This is kind of my job as a journalist, is that I am communicating robotics to people who are people like you who know lots about robots, but also to a much broader audience of people who may be reading about robots for the very first time. And so I'm going to talk about how to communicate robotics in a way that is accessible, that anyone can understand, and I'm also going to focus on how to connect with media like myself. And Sabine did an amazing job talking about things to think about when you are preparing your research to communicate yourself to the outside world. But there are also people like me whose job it is to help you do that and to help you get a much larger audience. Now, the other reason why, well, I guess I should say that I've been writing about robots for a while. I started writing about robots in 2007, which I'm not going to do the math on that, but it's been a long time. But so I've written probably somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 articles about robotics and emergent technology since then. But my background is actually not in robotics. And so I was one of those non-roboticist people for a very long time, which is actually great as a journalist because I have a very acute sense of what I don't know. And coming to these conferences, I'm continually reminded of what I don't know. So I know what questions people like me might ask in order to figure out what's actually happening. And just in case you were thinking that I'm a mechanical engineer or computer scientist or something, I'm actually an astrogeologist. I wrote my thesis on Martian impact cratering, and I'd be happy to talk more about that at some point because I never get to anymore. But there wasn't a lot of market for astrogeologists, so I kind of just basically did temp work for a long time and then started blogging as a hobby. I started this blog called Bot Junkie back in 2007, which maybe some people remember. Yeah. But this was back when you could actually make a living having your own blog. And it was totally random that I decided to get into robots, but nobody was really focusing on robots at that time. And so I kind of made a niche for myself, and I was writing articles for $4 each. And I was on the verge of not being able to feed myself when IEEE stepped in and said, hey, we're interested in robots. Do you want to come work for us? So that's what I've been doing since then. And IEEE has been fantastic. I'm extremely lucky to work there. The great thing about Spectrum is that we're one of very few publications where we make an effort to like tell a more technical side. And at the same time, we want to appeal to a wide audience, but we want to do so carefully. And so the research we write about, we do it in a way where we talk to the people actually doing the work, and we try to be as accurate as possible. We get in depth in a way that other publications don't. We want to keep it accessible so that folks like you will be interested in reading what we write, and also people who aren't engineers will be interested in reading what we write about. We've been doing this for a long time. Spectrum has a staff of, I don't know, 20 or 30 people who help make this happen. We still put out a print magazine every month on paper, which is kind of a trip. And then we also have a website. And so we also do kind of news, breaking news-ish. We're growing our social media very quickly. We have a team here at ICRA. We're putting out a lot of video. Laura's going to talk more about that. Okay, so we are the media, like that is what Spectrum is. And we are good at a lot of things, and we can help you in a lot of ways. So for example, we are really good at writing stories that people want to read. And what I mean by that is that we have a lot of experience understanding like what subjects and what topics people are actually going to engage with. And there's like a lot of content out there, robotics content and otherwise. There's more than we can possibly write about, but what we are very good at is kind of filtering that content and getting an understanding of this is what people are interested in right now, or here is how we would present what is happening right now in a way that people are interested in. And that's not just what's important, but also what's exciting. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. We're also very good at asking questions. My job as a journalist is to like understand a topic well enough that I can explain it. So we know like what are all the basic questions that we need to ask in order to communicate work to an outside audience. And they're oftentimes not questions that you might think about while you're doing your research or while you're presenting your research to an audience like you would find here, but they're these broad, you know, like the really annoying, why are you doing that question that isn't always required to be addressed in a research paper in a way that like would actually make sense to a broader audience. Yeah, that one. We are also bad at a lot of things, which I readily admit, like part of the deal with writing stories that people want to read, and in order to survive as a magazine, is that we have to write stories that people want to read or that people will read. And so sometimes we are constrained by like, even if there's something that is important or very relevant, sometimes we can write those stories if they're not going to appeal to a wider audience just because they're important, but other times we have to make difficult decisions about like, you know, is somebody going to click on this article? And so, yeah, we are responsible for things like clickbait headlines because we do need people to read. And I hate to use the word clickbait because I assume you all know what it means. It's like a sensationalized headline that is designed to get people to click. And there are ways to do them poorly and ways to do them well. Poorly is if you are basically lying in the headline, but you can also just write a really interesting headline to get people to click through. But it is something that, you know, a lot of publications tend to go on that. Let's get people to click thing. You will also find talking to journalists, especially those who don't specialize in robotics, you will get asked questions like, will robots take all of our jobs? Or will robots kill everyone? Or that sort of thing. And you could see in a couple of the headlines that Sabine showed, there is kind of that vibe. And this is just something to be aware of as you engage more with media, to be prepared for yourself to be asked really annoying questions like jobs, killer robots, all that stuff. And it's not usually maliciously asked. It's just something you want to be prepared to answer in a way that doesn't sound like you're panicking or anything like that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how media functions, just so you have a better understanding of like if you're engaging with media, what kind of things to expect. We get a lot of pitches, like really a lot of pitches. Probably, I don't know, 50 or 100 a week or so is about par. And these come from all kinds of different places. They come from people I've met at conferences will pitch me on stories about work that they're doing. Companies pitch me on stories all the time. Conferences pitch stories, journals pitch stories. There's just a lot of stuff for us to manage, and there is way more than we can possibly write about. And we're busy. Like besides pitches, we're writing stories for magazine, for online, we're making video, or we're doing social. Everybody's busy. Like you're busy, we're busy. And this is just to say that, like everything, communicating with media, you know, we take 2 weeks to respond to your email. I'm sorry, it happens. And it doesn't mean we care any less. It's just part of the process. And you know, I'm sure everybody's late responding to email, but media is no different. We're also really good at keeping secrets, and I think this is something that people often think the opposite. Like if you talk to a journalist, you have to be really careful about what you say because they'll just write about everything. But really, that's not what we do. You can talk to us off record or on background. These are two different things. If you talk to us off the record, it means we will not repeat what you say. If you talk to us on background, it means we may use what you say for context in an article, but we won't identify you. And generally, it's really easy to talk to us and just say, you know, can I tell you about some work I'm working on? You know, it's not published yet, but I'm excited about it. And we'll just say, yeah, we'll keep it a secret and, you know, come back to us so we can plan, and then come back to us when you're getting close to publication, and then we can talk again about it. If you have a story, pitching media is, again, we get a lot of pitches, so there's kind of things to know about more effective ways to do it. And the most important thing is to have a story, like not just a result, but an actual story arc. Sometimes a result is enough if you have like a really photogenic result. We can sometimes lean on that, but it's much better to have a story arc and think about why what you're doing is important and why people will care about it if they don't care about robots. Like, what is the bigger story here? And think about your friends, your family, who may not totally have an understanding of the technical level of what you're doing, but when you're explaining your work to them, like, how do you make them impressed? How do you make them realize that what you're doing is really cool and important? Specific timing is very helpful for media, telling us, like, in advance, ideally, you know, either I have work that I'm doing that's going to be published at some point soon, or my university is going to do a press release, but giving us some kind of time frame that we can plan around is super important. And this comes back to being able to talk to us and us being able to keep secrets. We often operate under embargo, which means that you can share your work with us in advance, as early as possible. We will write the article. We will not publish the article until you say we can publish the article. And so we often coordinate with like journal timings for journal publications or video releases, or we'll coordinate with your university on a press release or something. But this really helps us be able to put the amount of time and resources we need into your work in order to do a good job with it, because come to us months in advance and just say, here's a preprint, you know, here's some photos we took, and then we have time to talk to you, ask you questions, ask you for more photos, that kind of stuff, and we'll have everything ready to go. And as soon as you say yes, we'll push the button. We also like exclusives, which is you are free to say, like, you know, I like the way Spectrum writes about robots. I want you folks to write the authoritative story on what we're doing. And that's by no means do you have to do that, but you know, if we feel like this most often happens with the university press offices, right? If there's going to be a big press push and we know that 10 other publications are writing about whatever you're writing about, you know, it is less of a priority for us because we know that the news is going to get out there anyway, and we can still write a story that is more technical. It's just, you know, again, the resources thing, right? It's harder for us to justify sometimes. Also, having assets is a critical thing, and I think Laura's going to talk a little bit more about that too. But like, if you have a robot, have a good picture of your robot. Like, spend some time taking what we call a hero picture, which is like if you're thinking about an article, what is the picture at the top of that article going to be that's going to get everybody's attention? And so having, good lighting and stuff, and or having good video, super helpful because it'll also get our attention immediately. We'll say, okay, I know people are going to see this and think it's cool, so it's definitely worth our time to write about it. And on the subject of pictures, have you folks heard of charismatic megafauna? This idea that you have animals that are big and fluffy and that attract a lot of attention, and these animals, anytime they're in trouble, people just throw money at them because they are awesome looking. And there are a lot of robots that fall into this kind of charismatic megafauna category, right? Like if you're doing something on a humanoid, you can make a good video, you can take a good picture. Like, congratulations, you have like much less of a lift to do when you are communicating your research. And then you have other animals, like this is a dung beetle. I love dung beetles. Dung beetles are fantastic. Like they're just as cool as any of those other charismatic megafauna animals. But like, I don't even know if dung beetle conservation is a thing. It's a much harder argument to make because they're not pretty looking, they're not big. And so robots have this problem too. If you're not working on a physical system that moves or something, then your job is much harder. And my job is much harder. And that's not to say that the research is any less important, but communicating it is more difficult. So if you don't have a charismatic mega robot, what can you do? I think the most effective thing is to have a really good story. Like spend a lot of time thinking about why are you doing this? And why is it important? And like have an arc. And what I mean by an arc is be able to talk about when did you first get interested in this? And where did you start? And why did you think it was worth pursuing? And then what was hard about the work that you did? And how did you solve those problems? And then you get to the end and it's like, okay, and we have this result, and here's where that result is going to take us. And part of that last bit of where the result is going to take you is find a way of connecting with the reader. And even if they're not technical, I mean, the reader is a person, right? So how is your work going to benefit humanity at some point? And that may involve wild speculation. And this is different from hype. There is definitely some overlap, but there's nothing wrong with talking about, like, especially if you're doing basic robotics research, saying, okay, this is why this research is important because 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, this is what it will enable. And focus on kind of that end point because that's what people can get excited about. And even if it feels like most of the focus is on something that's beyond your research, what you're communicating is that your research is what will enable kind of that endpoint to happen. And a lot of this, I know it's a lot, and you do not have to do it on your own. It is my job, it is Laura's job, it is a lot of people's job to help you kind of solve all of these problems and communicate well. Something that I think is underutilized by roboticists is if you're at an academic institution, or certainly if you're at a company, you will have people whose job it is to help you communicate this stuff. There will be a press office somewhere, and you can talk to them, and they probably have photographers, they have people who will do video, they'll help you write a press release. Like there are people probably near you who can actually do a lot of this work. And then the other thing that I wanted to spend some time on is talking about AI, which Sabine mentioned, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit more detail. So I assume everyone here has probably played around with some kind of LLM just for fun. Yeah? How many of you have done that for work? You can admit, okay, great. How many of you feel guilty for having done it for work? Nobody, okay. So at Spectrum, we use it for work. We have a private instance of GPT-4 or something that we use for some very specific things. Like we will use it for iterating on headlines and stuff, or helping us in our creative process for coming up with social media headlines. Like I don't know, I hate doing social media headlines, sorry, but ChatGPT is great for it, or at least it has more experience with social media headlines than I have, for better or worse. But, you know, it's not just us, it's all of you folks, and it's also RAS. This is, RAS actively encourages you to use AI to help you communicating your work. And I want to be clear that at Spectrum, we never use AI as in reporting or writing articles. We use it to help with our creative process. I never use it to summarize anything because I can't trust it for all the obvious reasons. So it's a tool that if you use it carefully, it can do a lot of work for you. And so what I want to suggest is that more researchers should use AI to summarize and help you translate your own research. Not anybody else's, but what you actually wrote. Like if you write a paper, you can use AI to summarize that paper and make it more accessible because you can read that summary and you will know if it's bullshitting you or not, which is super important. And I can't do that with your research. I can't summarize your paper with AI because I won't know unless I read the paper. But you can just do this. And I think it can really be very helpful. And again, RAS is saying, yeah, please do that kind of thing. So I'll just give some really quick examples. Sabine used this paper too, as an example. Everyone knows Rod's paper. Super important. I don't know anyone outside of robotics who would ever really read or understand this paper. And so we'll just use it as an example of prompts that might be useful. And again, this is not something, even though it's me here, this is not something that I would do. This is something that you would do with your own paper. And so this is basically just making an abstract, right? It's just summarizing the paper, and then you do that anyway, but that's not nearly as useful as saying, okay, sorry, did I miss a thing in here? No, I didn't, okay. Like, a starting point is, if you are thinking about communicating with press, asking it what are the kinds of questions that press might ask you. And this isn't just useful for talking with someone like me or other media, but it is also this level is what are other robotics people who aren't necessarily in my specialty, what questions might they have about my work? And so for coming to a conference like this, this can really help provide some context for you, especially if you're at a poster session, preparing to answer questions on that level. But then you can go to another level, right? So this is kind of the sort of thing that I might be writing. So someone who doesn't know a lot about robotics, what kind of things might they want to know about the paper? And then what are the answers? And so this is much more accessible. But you can also take it to another level, right? If you were to ask, I think we're missing a slide, but you can also ask ChatGPT an elementary student, and that is extremely helpful. If you haven't tried this, you totally should, just to kind of keep going down. And then you can always go back up again in terms of complexity, but being able to start at a very fundamental, here's how I explain my research in a very basic way to an audience, can help you with social media, can help you communicate with journalists. There's a lot of options. And again, one more time, Spectrum doesn't do this with research because we can't trust it. But when you're doing your own paper, your own research, you can really rely on AI to help you with what is otherwise a very difficult thing to do all this translation. Yeah, and the last thing, I just added this slide. It's, especially in the US, it's a very difficult time for being a scientist in any field right now. And there's a limited amount of stuff that we can actually do to make a difference. But really communicating to as many people as we can what we're doing and why it's important and why it will be important long term is just, it's critical. And even if you're not in the US, making people aware, the public, politicians just aware of what's happening in robotics right now and why it's important is just, it's so important at the moment. And especially, again, if you can tell that story arc and make people aware that, yeah, all that cool robotics stuff that people are excited about right now, LLMs related and humanoids and drones and whatever, that started as fundamental basic robotics research. And so making that connection backward to illustrate why this stuff is important, I mean, it'd be really helpful to the whole community if we can all like focus on that in the near term, I think.
Hello. It's on, it's not, is it on?
Yeah, that's for online.
Oh. Hello. Okay. Hello. So I am not a roboticist and I'm not an engineer. I have a background in journalism on the environmental social justice beat. So this is, you might be wondering why I'm at a robotics conference, but what I know and what I'm good at is making content pop online and deploying brand discoverability strategies, which basically means to get a brand in front of as many people as possible. These days especially, each one of you should be thinking about yourself and or your robot as a brand. And social video can really help with that. So I'm going to ask a series of questions that are mostly to prove a point, but to also help me with some market research. By a show of hands, how many people here watch YouTube Shorts? Okay. How many people watch Instagram Reels? And how many people watch TikTok? Okay. So pretty much everybody here watches shorts on some kind of platform. Essentially what we're seeing today is that social video is social media. There are still platforms like Facebook and Twitter that kind of prioritize link sharing. But what we're seeing increasingly is that everybody wants to watch their news, watch their education, infotainment is very big, or just to be entertained online. So that is why it is a good idea to start to think about social video. So there's a few reasons why this can be so helpful to you and your work. So it's very easy to go viral on social video as opposed to any other platform. Back to Sabine's point, you know, that one article got 13,000 citations, whereas the video about it that was on the news got like 20 million. You don't need to have your work featured on the news or any like mainstream media platform necessarily anymore to go viral. Like this power is within your hands and a phone. So it's very, it's becoming very, very decentralized. It's an interesting time to be in media and you should really be taking full advantage of this. So a video with a lot of views can be useful for a number of reasons. One of the things it can do is if you have a research paper coming out, you can make a video about it and then drive that traffic towards the article that you post. So just to like walk you through the very basics of it, like you post a video on Instagram and you say, this is my paper, they describe it in like 30 seconds or less. You say for more information, head to the link in my bio where they can like find your paper. So it can be a direct route for traffic. It also, kind of to Evan's point, if you are approaching media, if you are approaching funders, if you just want to get a more authoritative presence online, having an account with a lot of followers and a lot of video views is unfortunately or fortunately just how people are judging success more and more these days. So, and again, all of this is free and open for you to use. It's just a matter of practicing and getting good at the tools. It is also a great way to, so the free advertising piece is a very important one because, so this is a screen grab from our Instagram account for one of our videos. So at the time that we posted this video, we had about 24,000 followers on Instagram. And this video was sent out to a total of over 1.5 million accounts. And the video total across our platforms got something like 3 million views or something. We don't have nearly that big of an audience. And it was served mostly to people who had never heard of Spectrum before. And the reason was because when you post a video that people engage with, so when they watch past a second or two, when they're, let the reel repeat, as it does automatically because they want to see it again, this is a signal to the algorithm that people like it, and so it will push it out to more people than just your followers. So this is like a classic case of discoverability. So people who watched our video ended up following our accounts. This one video that we did brought in thousands, I think something like 3.5 thousand people to our accounts, and they're not part of our audience. And so they now see everything that we post. And it's important to also consider that platforms, even including Facebook and Twitter, and the more legacy platforms, are prioritizing video content because that is what people want to see these days. So publishing a video is going to get basically free reach, free extra traffic, as opposed to a photo post or just dropping a link and writing a blurb. So videos get free advertising, essentially. Another benefit to social video is that it can be very short. People don't have really long attention spans these days, and you can use that to your advantage. You don't need to make a news segment. You don't need to make a documentary. You can make something as quickly and easily by just holding your phone in front of your face and talking about your project for a minute. You also don't have to be in these videos at all. That's very important too, that I need to keep remembering, because not everyone's comfortable being on video. You can just film your robot and charismatic megafauna, like Evan was saying. Robotics really lends itself very well to social video because there's a lot of visual appeal. So I'm gonna show you all a couple of, or a few videos just as an example of the kind of stuff that does well. And is this just an excuse to watch some videos together? Maybe, but hopefully I can. So should I, how does this work? So it's not showing up here though. It's in a different browser. Well, while this is hopefully going to happen in a few minutes, I'll tell you an example about the kind of content that Spectrum puts out that we found works really well is making content that is funny. So just as an example, okay, the sound doesn't, no, doesn't have sound. So yeah, this can make it,
Oh, no.
We've all been this kitten before, just being bowled over by the Roomba of life. So this is, it's about a robot, and it's relatable. People, yeah, I wish it was continuing to play, but that's okay. Yeah, so it's the kind of thing that everybody knows this feeling, and this is so even if people are not, immediately interested by Roombas, they like kittens, or they, can relate to this feeling that you're trying to evoke. And so this can all of social video is what we consider a top of funnel marketing strategy, where you're getting the video in front of as many people as possible. Not all of those people are going to be your primary audience, but within those huge numbers, you're going to find people who are interested in your work. This video has over 500,000 likes, so that means it got millions and millions of views. So just another example, let's see what we got. So this, here we go. It doesn't really need music, but.
Oh.
So the the caption on here, never let them know your next move, is a very popular meme. And so if there's a way that you can like see a statement like this online where you're like, oh, I could apply this to my robot, that's going to give it some extra juice. Like people are going to recognize, it's kind of called like hopping on a trend. And that is just another way to like get your video like a lot of extra mileage. All right, let's see. So this one is not about robotics, but what I wanted to describe here or like demonstrate is that you can take a complex or like this is fake, okay? It's just a joke. But if you take if you have a sort of complicated robotics concept that you want to describe, think about how you can do it in a way that is like done with household objects, or if there's a way that you could kind of like dumb it down for a broad audience, again, to like find and eventually retain your core audience. So the idea is like the jam always falls down on like if you drop a piece of toast, it's always gonna fall flat on the jam side, and then the shoes always fall on the sole side. Do you get it? Do you want me to show it again? It's kind of like, sorry. It's because these things are so short and they start to play, like this hard to do it on a presentation. Are we good? Do you get it? Anyone want me to play it again? Okay. Okay. So yeah, just as a way of saying like be creative, make it funny if it makes you laugh. What is that sound? Is that a train? Okay. Yeah, just if it makes you laugh, it'll probably do really well. We don't need the sound on this one, but essentially like we all know that spot. And so this is just a way to like show your robot doing weird, unexpected things. So yeah, a dog in a buggy, like why not? But again, all of these examples that I'm showing you are, they went viral. These are very, very popular videos. And as an example of something that Spectrum is going to be publishing in a week or so, hopefully. I don't know how many of you saw the flapper drones on the exhibitor hall floor. So those are modeled after fruit flies. And so we're going to do a video that is explaining the technology, and all while Evan here is being harassed by a fruit fly. It's going to be hovering around his face, getting in his salad, and it's going to be really funny. And yeah, so because of that, like we're gonna be able to explain a complicated concept, describe the robot, and do it in an entertaining way. So how do I get back to... Okay, yeah, I think, yeah, let's just, there's a way to just, actually, could we like just play just this one and this bottom one? Yeah, the bottom one, yeah.
We're not on this station. Of course we make it.
Okay. Okay, so, okay, 3 minutes. I'll just show this. This one that we published this video, just another quick, oh yeah. Just like I'll just do one more example of like something that we did at last ICRA. This is using a trending sound, so I'll play it here. Oh, cool, the sound isn't on, I love that. You think I'd be better at this? Okay, here we go.
I think you muted the computer.
Okay, you know what? It's fine. This, I don't know how many of you have heard the "she was a fairy" sound. She was a fairy. I think like 50 Cent was flying through the air during a concert that he did in Vegas. Anyway, so it was this very popular video that got, like, it's a trending sound on TikTok. So when you edit videos on TikTok and use a trending sound, it will automatically juice your video views because people are searching for this sound. And so it will come up on people's For You page very easily. And we just thought that this little delivery robot kind of looked like a fairy because I don't know, has like legs. Again, I don't know. This is my interpretation. I'm not a roboticist, but yeah, this one ended up doing pretty well, and it's just another example. Okay, I think I'm out of time.
Yeah, that was awesome. I think it's really great to see the wealth of ways you can do science communication. At least I learn a lot every time Laura does one of her presentations, so I'm really excited. So yeah, we're going to be holding office hours. We're trying to figure out who's interested in one-on-ones with us. So the best for us would be that you stay and we have the one-on-ones right after this session. If you'd like to talk more with us, we have a sign-up sheet and we can try to figure out a time to speak with you either today or tomorrow. I'll be around tomorrow as well. So if you have ideas or questions you want to speak with us, please do come after the session. We'd love to hear more. Follow us on social media, either IEEE Spectrum, all the IEEE RAS channels. They're doing a great job with Taraja as well on getting the word out on IEEE RAS. And then we'd love as well follow us on what we're doing with our charities, RoboHub and AI Hub. And I think just go ahead and try and tell us what you're working on so that we can see what information you're putting out there and we can amplify your work. So now I think we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So please ask any of us questions. Yeah, go ahead.
So wonderful seminar. I really liked it. I have several questions, but I'll just ask one burning because getting others at the time as well. I had one for Laura. I like the idea using the short video formats. It's something which is trending, and then you leverage it to just make your own research. But my question is this: there have been several talks about how the short video format is pretty addictive. It's probably not a good, a source or a medium in which you communicate with people. So there's this ethical dilemma which I have, in which I have to, popularize my research. I have to reach out to people. But now I am using some sort of a platform or a framework which potentially is not good for the people. So where do I, how do I solve this?
So it's not potentially not good for people?
So the short TikTok video formats, they're pretty addictive, and it's
Addictive.
yeah, and the research in general says that it's probably not a good source or a medium or a framework to.
Right, because of the addictive nature.
Yes.
We don't want to promote addiction.
Yes, so we are in this dilemma in which we are leveraging what's currently trending, but at the same time, I feel like we have some moral obligation towards.
I mean, it's an interesting question, and it's especially interesting because most of the robotics videos that we publish are all the comment sections, and Evan was talking about this a bit about people are like questioning the morality of a lot of the robots, like job stealers, weaponized, all of this stuff. And I think at the end of the day, we just have to work with the world that we're given. People are going to be on social media. Like this is where everybody is. It is addictive, and I suppose that there's no really way of getting around the fact that, like, yes, anyone who posts on social video is contributing to that. I do think, though, if you are, providing education, and if you are providing ways for people to like engage with your work, those benefits outweigh the harms. And it's kind of like, even if you decide to take a moral stance and not contribute to people's social video addiction, they're still going to be addicted, by the end of the day. So, like, yeah, I would say if you're doing something that is educational at the end of the day, it's probably a net neutral at the very least.
Yeah, I would also say that something that we're trying to be very intentional about is there's a lot of really bad robotics content on social media. There's a lot of content that people are posting about context. There is content that people are manufacturing context for that is not accurate. And so we are trying to build a social media following such that people will recognize that we are communicating like, these are real robots doing real things, and it is accurate and interesting. And if you can be a part of that, being able to say, like, this is my research, this is why it's important, I think that is really valuable. I know it's kind of like screaming into the wind a little bit, but every little bit helps.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ideally, you also link to a longer form if you want more time.
Hi, thank you all for the very interesting talk. My question is related again to the social media and sharing things. Like, I know it's quite easy nowadays to use all this technology, but when it comes to ownership, like, can I just put a video of my work, or will the university be angry because they own the research? Like, how do you deal with that?
So
That's, did you wanna?
well, from the university perspective, I've never had a situation where the university is unhappy with me promoting my work unless I do it really poorly, and then the reputation damage goes to the university. As part of your research, you tend to own your images. When you publish images and papers, etc., sometimes you need to be a little bit mindful of reusing them because the copyright does go to the publications. But if you make an edit to the image or you slightly change it, often that does the trick. So I've never had any issues putting on social media my own work.
Yeah, and I would also add to that is that if you're at all concerned about it, just tagging the school or whoever that you're concerned about, just tagging them in the description or saying like photo credits or video credits belong to, you know, whatever entity they belong to, if that makes sense.
The one time that I've run into complications with that is if you have a paper that has been accepted at a high impact journal. They often have their own press offices, and they kind of treat, after it's been accepted, they treat it kind of as their thing, and they'll work with you on it. And you are also free to, you know, if it's not AAA journal, it's still free to talk to Spectrum. It just means we will also work with the journal, not just you, in order to make sure that we're all coordinated. Because yeah, when you submit, if it's accepted at a journal, it's effectively under embargo at that journal, and so they get a little upset if, you know, their exclusive shows up elsewhere, and that I think would probably include social media. But also, if you have in progress stuff, you don't have to worry about that, and they won't like ask you to take stuff down if it gets accepted. It's just, yeah.
Hi, I'm Maria. I'm a postdoc researcher at MIT. And one thing I've noticed is that there does seem to be a huge bias for promoting work that comes from the top institutions or the top companies. You know, I'm a postdoc at MIT right now, but that's not where I did my PhD or my bachelor's degree. And I know of people doing amazing work at other places. Sometimes I see articles being written about a group or a project that I've seen in person and I wasn't very impressed with in person. The article makes it seem unbelievable. Like for people who aren't in that world, like how do you I don't know, how can we best promote our work without overhyping it and, you know, without trying to make it seem like we're the only ones doing this or we're the first ones to do it. Like I just want to be truthful, not just in the work that I'm doing, but also give credit to other people who are also researching the same type of things that I'm doing.
Just very briefly, so that's something that we worry about a lot at RoboHub and AI Hub. And so we launched special series to get early career voices, to get different institutions contributing. We connect with the press offices of as many institutions as we can to make sure that we're hearing not just from the biggest institutions, but that requires a lot of legwork. And so there's two things. I think those, if you're from one of those institutions that doesn't get coverage, let us know, because if you don't let us know, sometimes it's harder for us to go looking everywhere. But the other, if you're a keen volunteer, we'd love focus series where you interview people from those places and institutions to boost them. So I think it's kind of our responsibility.
And as you're probably aware, MIT has a massive press office. And so they have people going around to all of these labs and saying, what are you working on? And then they write their articles, and then they don't just put out press releases. Like, they have a personal relationship with journalists like me. And so they will plant, I say plant, it sounds bad, but like they are pushing very heavily all these stories out. And many big institutions have this. And then you at smaller institutions, there may not be a press office, or if there is, they're not going to come to you. You have to go to them, and people don't know to go to them. So I think that's really what it is that those big institutions have more resources. But I totally take your point. I think that it takes, as Sabine was saying, like people like you, like the researchers, to make sure that even at these big institutions, the press office's job is to write the story that you tell them. So being actively involved in that process and saying, why aren't we mentioning the research that this is based on? That's not going to be their favorite thing to do, but it's your story, and you can take ownership of it in that way.
We also have great communicators in the room, so if you have anything to highlight or you want to comment, please do.
So suppose I was the guy in the Destroy Humans video as a researcher. What would you tell me to do next? Like, how do I fix that? How do I come back
Like
from that?
from the NBC.
Yeah.
How do you fix that? Like after the fact?
Yeah.
There's only so much you can really do. I mean, that was why there was some part of in my presentation I mentioned, like, be aware that they may ask you this stuff and have an answer. Like, ideally, you wouldn't let it get to that point. Yeah, and this is a problem with social media broadly too, because if you put out a video that's very popular, maybe Laura, you can talk about this more, like people will remix it and stuff. They'll just take it and they may take stuff out of context. And yeah, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I think there's a saying that there's no such thing as bad press, and that's not exactly true. However, it's sort of true. So what I would say, this is like, if you are experiencing some controversy, it's a really good opportunity for you to, do you know what I mean by stitching the video? So like basically on certain platforms, you can like have the video playing on one half of the screen and then you're on the other half of the screen addressing certain claims. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be that format, but basically you can say, hey, like I have another perspective to add to this topic. And those are exactly the kind of conversations that social media is designed for. So you should look at that as an opportunity. Even though it might feel like a threat, it's ultimately an opportunity if you frame it right.
Maybe just quickly. So what I tell my students when they get those questions is to slightly deflect them. So to address that it's an important question, but the area of expertise is to make a robot that's, you know, designed for cooking, and then that allows you to avoid the opportunity for some of those answers to happen. So sometimes just falling back on your narrow area of expertise is a good way to pull it out of the conversation. But if it happens, it's okay. I kind of agree. There's so much on social media now that it's not gonna be the end of the world if it goes wrong. I think it's better to not fear and do it than to be so paralyzed by it that you never go out.
Yeah.
And also, just to be clear, that video, they kind of do that on purpose. Yeah, and you are also, even if the journalist there asked him to, can you ask this robot to say, will you kill all humans? You can just say no, and it's fine.
So I had a different question, but Sabine, your point about, you know, let's pivot back to the robot working in the kitchen. I want to probe with that a little bit, because I think a lot of the things that are really interesting about social media and interesting to people hearing us talk as scientists and engineers is not only our specific work, but what we think about the course of it. So how do you balance that, and how do you balance that with your students?
I would say it depends on level of expertise and comfort. So I'd say one of my postdocs was doing her first live radio interview this weekend. And to her, I say deflect, because it's the first one and you don't want to go in having a huge discussion without having practice. But when I get asked, I have a conversation about it, because that is part of our responsibility, and we're also social actors, and actually our opinion matters a lot in terms of the societal impact that we think our robots will have. So it's like a stepping stone. Start safe, and then put yourself out there a little bit more as the conversation goes out. And I think very often they're not coming into those questions as I'm trying to trap you or attack you. It's a genuine interest in what our opinion is. And often they're really healthy conversations. They're really balanced. They're looking at, they see the pros and the cons. And so I found those conversations usually quite interesting and fun. So they're not always scary. Yeah.
You're also, not every journalist will do this, but you can ask to fact check your article. And we always try to do this, and that's just to say, after the article's written, you can say, please send this to me for a fact check before you publish. So you can have a chance to look at it and make sure that nothing was taken out of context, that nothing is wrong. And because honest misinterpretations do happen, but you do have the ability to kind of be more part of that process and have a chance to look at it before it goes out to the world.
This is a follow-up to something that was asked earlier in the front row somewhere about asking for permission. I think before we even get to the journal, what about our PIs? Should we let them know? And you know, we're either the student or the postdocs or something. And as much as it is our work because we're doing it, it is the PI's work as well.
That'll depend on the PI. So it's always good to communicate. That solves most problems. So I'd say if you're worried, or if a student is worried, or a postdoc is worried about their PI not approving of them being out there on social media communicating, it probably is a good idea to just have the conversation, to say, I'm excited about this. I want to put some information about my robots out there. Just how comfortable you are. And hopefully the PI will say, sure, go for it. And I'd love to follow you and have some insight on what you're putting and amplify it. But having the conversation is probably better than worrying about the PI not being happy with what you put out there. And if it happens that they're not happy because they want to control the messaging or they want to, then it's good to know that so that you can focus on other robots or do a series, you know, that amplifies other things. But I'd hope that they're supportive. Yeah.
I prefer to talk to the person doing the actual work. But when I email, if I see a paper I want to write about, I will email first author, last author, and then just let them take it. Yeah.
I'll ask a question no one else has to. Yeah, okay. When you're taking videos, let's say, and your colleague or your friend wants to show in it, and it's going on your personal account, do you have to get written consent? Like, what if in a year they say, oh, actually, I never said you could show my face or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, when we're doing interviews for involving anybody, we always ask, like, are you comfortable being on camera or not? And we just follow that exactly. Like, we never put anybody, and it's never a good idea to put anybody on camera when they're not explicitly aware that that's going to happen. Is that your whole question?
Yeah.
Can they change their mind in the future? If you don't have anything written down, could you be personally liable?
So what you should do is, like, when you're filming, before you start the interview, say, like, are you comfortable being on camera? So you have the video proof. Because, yeah, they can't really pull that back after the fact. Or, you know, if they do, you can make a judgment call as to whether you pull the video and, like, re-edit it and post it again. Although you should avoid doing that at all costs, because duplicate uploads will very negatively affect your algorithm.
Just ask. A lot of this is huge. Just ask.
Yeah, but after the fact is tricky. Because the other thing too is, like, if that video or whatever is shared with a bunch of other work, like on our website, for example, if it gets taken down, then the video is no longer attached to the article, and so, like, a lot of context may be missing. Yeah, so it's tricky, and you can just try not to, you know, don't have your friends in your videos or something, or just make sure it's people who are invested, like your lab mates or something, who are invested in having that research out there.
I think we want to go to the award luncheon.